All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking to you today. It is Friday. It's the free for all, and hope you'll call in. I know we've had at least one caller attempt to reach me this week, but apparently there was some incompatibility between the phone systems, and they weren't able to get through. If you try, I will do my best, obviously, to get you on to talk to me. That's never a problem on Halitics. You always can talk to me. Tell me what you think. And I'm guessing from the negative commentary I see frequently on Halitics group page on Facebook that you have problems with my views. And that's no surprise. But what would be nice is to try to hash them out a little bit. One thing, those who are regulars who watch my program on YouTube now well over a year, getting on 2 years, as well as veterans from the old radio program in Monterey know that I definitely will listen. I will hear what you say. I will respond to it. And I may even have my mind changed. It has been on 1 or 2 occasions over the past 20 years I've actually revised my views. So that is always a possibility. It's the free for all. So yeah, I'm going to kind of revisit. I mean, we're topics. Well, I'm going to hit homelessness. Haven't talked about that in a while. What a terrible, terrible crime that is. And I see the phone is ringing. How nice. Somebody is calling in. So let me get you right on. You're on with Hal. Who's calling?
This is Lawrence. I'm in
Lawrence. Good to hear from you,
California.
Lawrence.
I used to be a listener of yours and a frequent caller when you were in Monterey.
I remember you, Lawrence, and I think I even know your last name, but I won't out you. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ramirez.
I do comment sometimes. Okay, so what I'm confused about, I've recently discovered your YouTube channel just recently. And like I said, being a follower of you and a fan of your radio station back in Monterey, I'm a little confused about some of your stance, especially with the Biden and Harris. I understand they might not be ideal progressives for a lot of people, and but you seem to promote Jill Stein, and it was kind of surprising that Liz Cheney had actually said a comment that kind of reminded me of you when she said that you cannot put in write-ins thinking that this is going to affect keeping Donald Trump out of office. So my confusion is one, maybe I guess I can hear from you, is what your stance is on Donald Trump, because I'm confused if you're a supporter of Donald Trump over the progressive.
Oh no, I let me just jump in right there, Lawrence, and I'll let you get back in. But that sort of was a kind of, I guess, a formative question. I mean, it's really important. No, I do not support Donald Trump. I strongly oppose Donald Trump's candidacy. I think he was a terrible president, and I think he'd be a terrible president again. But I also strongly oppose Kamala Harris's run for president. I think she would be a terrible president. I think the Biden-Harris administration has been incredibly destructive to our country and to our world. So I can't back either one. I do support strongly Jill Stein. I'll let you get back, but one final point. I've often said, you may not have heard this, and you may remember, I don't know if I said this in Monterey, but I do have a litmus test. And my litmus test is I won't support a candidate if I believe they're going to do more harm than good. If I believe that they, on balance, their efforts, not just, I mean, look, it's hard, right? I mean, Congress is corporate owned and stacked against us, progressives. But if I think a candidate will actively work to undermine my values, which I believe Barack Obama tragically did, and I strongly supported him for president, but I believe he did. I believed Hillary Clinton would if she was elected based on her record. And I think Joe Biden wasn't as bad as I feared he might be. I did vote for him, by the way, but because of his policies on Israel, ultimately I couldn't support him. That's how I feel about Harris as well. That's what I got. You go ahead.
No, I agree with you, because I think if I remember the time frame correctly, and I think I do. What initiated probably your involvement in the radio station in Monterey, and a lot of people at that time, was what George W. Bush was doing in Iraq, what we did in Iraq. I think a lot of us were infuriated with that. And I agree with you. I'm pretty disgusted about how Israel is proceeding in Gaza, and I do not agree with Biden's or Harris's full-throated endorsement of Israel and the genocide that's happening. I totally agree with you on that. But when we bring it back domestically, a vote for Jill Stein or like Liz Cheney said, writing in a name that allows Donald Trump to get in, he's just going to hand Israel whatever they want. And he's done that with moving their capital from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and just like I said, just being amenable to whatever Netanyahu wants. And so a vote for Jill Stein, a vote for anybody else that's not a viable candidate. And I know you're saying that she more reflects your values, and I understand that. I'm not downplaying that or negating that you feel that way. But that would allow a more viable path for Donald Trump to get him. And like I said, and then he will just, like I said, open the door for whatever Israel and Netanyahu want to do. And that would work against your antipathy for the genocide that is occurring there. And what are your feelings on that?
Okay, so you asked, and I have talked a lot about this, Lawrence. I don't know how much worse you can be than Biden Harris. I mean, they continue to provide the bombs that are being used to kill Palestinians. I just put this headline up. This is from today. 4 children among 18 Palestinians killed in Israeli airstrikes. We have, Israel's expanded its operations now into the West Bank, where it's also a killing field. So I don't know how much worse Trump could be. You brought up the issue of, when it comes to Israel, you brought up the issue of Jerusalem being where we keep our embassy, and agreed, that was a terrible thing that Donald Trump did. But Joe Biden had a decision to make when he took office whether to move the embassy back, and he chose to leave it. He chose to leave it in Jerusalem. So while I agree it's worse what Trump did to actually take the step to move it, Biden did not rectify that very terrible action by Trump. And while I agree with you that Trump could be worse, although I don't know how much worse we could be, there are other areas where I actually think Trump could conceivably be less bad. And I've discussed the war in Ukraine, the proxy war that we're engaging against Russia, and at least Trump's rhetoric is less bellicose than Harris's is there. So I can't be certain that on these incredibly important life and death issues, Trump will invariably be worse than Harris. But even then, I have that litmus test. I can't support a candidate who I think will make things worse. And this is genocide. We agree. I just wouldn't feel good about myself as a human being if I voted for genocide. What I'm trying to do instead is rally people to a candidate that I think really will make life better for around the world, actually, Lawrence.
No, I'm not negating those feelings, and let's go back to 2016 and the people that voted for Ralph Nader. I'm sure they had some altruistic feelings about that as well. And Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton.
Well, let me just correct you. I hate to do this, but yeah, I think Nader was 2000, and he ran against Gore and George W. Bush, and then Hillary was 2016, right? And that was actually Jill Stein. So Stein ran then also.
Actually, you're correct. I'm sorry. You're right. I got that mixed up. But I'm what I'm meaning to say is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders had caused some. And we know when there is a contested convention, like Bernie Sanders did do during the Hillary 2016, the Democrats will lose. If you go back to 1980 when Jimmy Carter and Ted Kennedy ran against Jimmy Carter, and even when Pat Buchanan ran against George H.W. Bush, the incumbent loses. And so even Bradley, I think he also ran contested against Al Gore back in 2000. So my point is, or where I'm going with this is um, when when, like I said, when in 2016, when Bernie Sanders ran against Hillary Clinton, um, I think that we were not able to, when you pick an unviable candidate, because Bernie Sanders really didn't have a path to get the nomination. And when people voted for Bernie Sanders, and in 2000 when people voted for Ralph Nader, it allowed the, and I hate to use this term, but I know it.
The
People don't like it.
worse, the worse, the worse are evil. The greater evil. The greater evil.
Yeah, the
I
greater
understand.
evil
I got it. You feel like Democrats, even those far on the left, need to unify against a far from perfect candidate. And that's certainly the Obama position too. And I don't know, I don't agree with that view. We just ultimately disagree, I think, is the bottom line on that, Lawrence. But let me ask you this, because we could worry that and talk about it. But I kind of want to try to get to maybe what you think is a solution, because I think from what you're saying, our values are similar. We want to see an end to the killing overseas. I think our values are similar. We want to make sure that people have homes, right? I mean, homelessness is such a serious problem in California. I haven't gotten to it, but that's where you are. So when I've gone to California, even recently, which has now been about 4 years, I was, Lawrence, I'm sure, I don't know how often you get up to the Bay Area, but I mean, Berkeley was just, it was like a homeless camp, the whole city. And it's so sad and it's terrible for the people, but it's also, it's a negative impact on everyone's quality of life. So my question to you is, we have seen Democrats fail, right, to address these critical issues. And if we keep voting for, the lesser of evils, shall we say, the Hillarys, sadly, the Obamas, the Harrises, if we keep doing that, the Bidens, how can we expect to address these crises?
Well, I agree with you about the homelessness, because Gavin Newsom, just signed the legislation where they can, tear down the encampments now. Now, I know it's not like they might be eyesores or whatever, but it's just not a viable option for treating homeless people that way, because they don't have options for these people to live. But what I guess I've been living my life politically doing the lesser two evils, because, like I said, there's no perfect candidate that has a viable pathway to win. And like I said, when Liz Cheney stated, and this is a Cheney, stating that you can't just write somebody's name in and expect it to.
Well, she endorsed Harris. I wasn't sure if you. Yeah, she said she's voting for Kamala.
Harris, but the reason why she said is because, one of the reasons she says, because you can't write someone's name in thinking that that's not really a vote for Donald Trump, because there's no viable option. Now, I think we both know that she's not a Democrat. She's not progressive by any means, but she's doing it for the case of democracy. And in our altruistic feelings about this country and what we want it to be, yes, Jill Stein, people in that ilk, we would rather have them there that could, like I said, end that would have policies that we more agree with. But again, and it's not to say that you shouldn't do what you believe in, or any person who wants to vote that way. But when this person doesn't have a viable path to the office, whether it be president or legislator, congressman, whatever it is, doesn't have a viable path to the office, what are we really doing? We're really making it easier for the opposition, like I said, the greater evil, to get into office. And everybody says, when people say that when you do this, Joe Biden, Obama, you can then rally or you can lobby for your point of view. Now, like I said, it doesn't really get put into policy, but at least there's a chance. Now, when you vote for Jill Stein or Ralph Nader, who was back in the day, and the people, George W. Bush gets in office or Donald Trump gets in office, we don't have that option. That option is no longer there.
I hear you, Lawrence. I got your view. I honestly, and I don't mean that dismissively. I mean, I've heard that from many people. I don't
Yeah.
think it's absurd. I would just say my final word, and then if you want to get one word more point in, please do. I feel like we've been doing the same thing over and over, and we have not. And things have gotten worse. As I mentioned, my goal here is to not vote for candidates that I believe will make things worse, and that's my fear from Harris.
Well, it was nice to hear from you. I've read some comments on your YouTube post, but it was nice to hear from you because I was such an admirer of you back in Monterey, and I will continue listening to you, and we'll probably call in again from time to time.
Hey, it's awesome, man. Thank you so much. Wow, what a great compliment to hear from Lawrence calling in from Monterey. And I'm going to take that down where it says Lawrence is calling from CA, which he was doing. Got that up at the end. I'm going to try to start doing that. If you call in and you identify yourself, I'll go ahead and put your name up there as well as a caller. That'll be a new thing and still a little rudimentary. So, his view, Lawrence's view, is very much, I believe, the plurality, if not the majority view in the Democratic Party and on the left. And I don't totally reject it. I get it. And I think there are times when you do vote for arguably the second best candidate if you think they have a much better chance of winning. That one example might be the Ralph Nader Al Gore race, which Lawrence alluded to in 2000 when I think W was the worst possible choice. And I think one of the worst, clearly, I don't say think, he was one of the worst presidents we've ever had. A torturer, incurious, lack of empathy, his choice of vice president, perhaps someone even worse. Al Gore was a much better choice. I personally believe he was a better option even than Nader. I think he would have been a significantly better president than Bill Clinton. Not that would have been so challenging, but I think he would have been. I think he would have been a better president than Nader by a goodly margin. I didn't share a lot of Nader's views. But, you might say, a lot of people would say, hey, Ralph Nader's career was a tremendous success story. He took on GM. He took on Big Auto at a time when it was incredibly powerful. It was like the tech industry of today. He took them on and he made cars safer. Ralph Nader made automobiles safer. And he would have been, you could say, you believe he would have been a much better president. So I get that. But you say, well, I like Nader, but I'm going to vote for Gore because he has a better chance to beat W. I think in that case, you have also a situation, though, where I believe Al Gore would have made life better or would have tried to make life better for average everyday Americans. I don't see that. I just don't see that in Kamala Harris. And that's why I can't support her. The situation in Israel, I showed this earlier. The latest, 18 more reported dead in Gaza. And that suggests, by the way, that in that article that there may well be more dead because there's a lot of rubble and, people are buried under the rubble. And we know that the official count is an undercount. And there you can see, the results, the fruits of Israeli bombing, the poisonous, toxic fruits of Israeli bombing with our weapons, with our bombs. There's Gaza City. And, I keep highlighting it. I think it's really, really important to understand that the death count now, is it over 40,900, I believe, around 40,900 and 18 more killed yesterday. That's the official count. Almost certainly it's significantly higher. Lawrence makes a fair point, a very fair point. I don't mean fair like it's okay. It's a good point in that it's accurate and relevant. Trump might well be worse. Again, I don't know how much worse he can be than just giving Israel everything it wants, but maybe Bibi's a little bit restrained. There's an argument he's acting less brutally with slightly kid gloves. They're not that he hasn't taken off the kid gloves and put on the mailed fist because he worries that maybe there is a red line that he could cross in terms of Biden or Harris, that they might have a red line where Trump win. You could argue that. I haven't seen it. I'm sorry. What's happening now is so awful. And it's with our help. It's with our support. It's with our full-throated, what did she say? Unequivocal, I think is the word that Harris used, her unequivocal support. Here, let's go to the West Bank, where Israel has expanded operations.
Smashed windows and bullet holes. It's the aftermath of an Israeli raid here in Jenin in the occupied West Bank, where the army launched a wide-scale military operation over a week.
This is today's news, just so you know. Today's news from France 24.
The fighting has taken a heavy toll on residents.
An army car came and parked here. There was shooting and we shouted. They started shooting in the windows, so we went downstairs and we shouted and told them to stop, that no one was here. They started knocking on the second floor. We stayed there, in the stairwell.
Vehicles and cranes belonging to an electricity company were also destroyed during the raid.
In short, all of the assets of the Northern Electricity Distribution Company were directly attacked. If you ask me about the losses, they affected all our assets that you see here. It's clear to everyone. The company's...
I just want to bring home to people the scale of the destruction that we're behind, right? The U.S. is standing behind Israel. The Biden-Harris administration is standing behind this. We're protecting the perpetrators of this genocide. We'll get into why, and I've used the term genocide quite a bit, but I want to get into a little bit more in just a moment why it is such an appropriate term to describe what Israel is doing.
3 cranes have been badly damaged.
According to the army, the city and adjacent camp are a bastion for Palestinian armed groups. The camp was shut off by troops as part of the Israeli operation, leaving some residents too afraid to step outside.
So they're just utterly destroying the city. And the argument by Israel is, well, it's okay because they're rebels, right? They're rebels. They're people who are fighting our illegal occupation. Well, that's not, there's no legal justification for clearing out a city, for bombing it, for turning it into rubble, because some of the people living there are exercising their internationally recognized legal right to take on an occupier, to fight for their own freedom, to fight for their liberation. And that's what's happening. Israel is an occupying force. They're engaging in a war against Palestine. They're trying to wipe it out. People who live in Jenin are trying to fight that. They're allowed to do that. What Israel's retaliation is totally illegal and indeed genocidal. So let's get into that just for a moment. So I want to show you. So here's the definition. By the way, another really high-profile death this morning on the West Bank, but I'll do the genocide talk first, then get to the death in, I think it was in East Jerusalem. So the definition, this is, I think, used by the Holocaust Museum, but I got this from the Britannica encyclopedia, I guess. The deliberate and systematic destruction of a group of people because of their ethnicity, nationality, religion, or race. So it doesn't mean you try to kill all of them, although that's certainly a major, piece of evidence in support. And side does mean kill, right? Homicide, killing a person, Matricide, you kill a mom, right? So, but they're saying you're destroying or killing a group. So it's killing the members, it's targeting them, but it's destroying them. And so what you see, Israel has separated the Palestinian people. There are those who are on the West Bank. They're an ethnic group. They don't share religion. There are Christian Palestinians. There are Druze Palestinians. There are Muslim Palestinians. But they're all being destroyed. They're being pushed in different places. They're separated. They cannot move freely. Their cities are being bombed. The colonists from Israel are moving in. This was a really instructive article I got yesterday, I got this notification from Haaretz. That's sort of the more liberal, I guess sort of like the New York Times of Israel, right? It's not like the hard right. So this is what I got yesterday. You can see the date, Thursday, 05/09. So that doesn't mean May 9th. That means the fifth day, 5 September 9/24. Netanyahu's map shows Israel from the river to the sea. It's no accident. So you can see where Jerusalem is sort of in the middle of that map. I hope that's big enough for you. Maybe I can expand it a little bit. But there's no West Bank, which would be, if you look at that map, it would be to the right of Jerusalem in there. So Jerusalem is, I guess, like, you can see it now. And then you see the sort of light green on the far right as you're looking at the screen is Jordan. But the West Bank is not part of Israel. It's not technically considered Israeli territory. Yes, Israel occupies it, but it's not considered part of the country of Israel. Obviously, Bibi wants to change that. He shows this map to journalists. He's wiped Palestine, the West Bank, that area. He's quite simply wiped it off the map. That is indeed genocide. It is what Israel is attempting to do. And they are largely, can you use the word successful? It feels like it, because, I mean, it's such an awful thing. It's so horrible. But in terms of their goal, there's basically hardly any Gaza left. It's just rubble. And we just don't even know. The death count could be 10% now. To be clear, he refuses. This is Haaretz. It's not, and we've heard the Biden-Harris team say, we've heard Anthony Blinken say, Israel's accepted our peace proposal. Israel's accepted the ceasefire agreement. Now we're waiting on Hamas. Haaretz isn't buying that nonsense. It's our closest ally, Israel, that's rejecting the ceasefire, as Haaretz makes it very, very clear. Yesterday, Netanyahu made the case for rejecting the agreement. And by doing that, he cost 6 Israeli lives. 6 hostages were killed. Almost, the intelligence says they would have been released. But Bibi said, nope, no deal. We have to control both east and west of Gaza. That was one of the major points. We need an agreement from Hamas that Israel controls the entrances to Egypt, which would have meant the utter strangulation of Gaza. So, to the extent Hamas could do anything, they could say, well, we're not going to agree to that. And Israel said, well, we're going to if we can't kill you by starving you, by cutting off all aid completely from east and west, because on the east side it's Israel, and we've got checkpoints there everywhere. Make sure just a little trickle of aid gets in every now and then, so the international community won't get too upset and we won't hear too much squawking from the Americans. I mean, remember we had that pier that Biden announced. They said, forget it, pier doesn't work, don't work. So Netanyahu says, we're just letting a little trickle in on the east side because we don't want to hear more squawking from the Americans. But there's too much getting in from Egypt. So we got to have both sides. We got to control both sides. It's genocide. That's what it is. It's the deliberate destruction of this ethnic group by whatever means Israel has at its disposal. And remember, we're giving them those. U.S., Biden-Harris is giving Israel those means. Nothing new about Israel erasing Palestine. So again, this is a long-standing effort to eradicate the Palestinian people. The green line is the line. It's not really a line, by the way, because it's squiggly. It follows the Jordan River. The Jordan River, which is east of Palestine, and the West Bank is, the Jordan River actually isn't that squiggly. The Jordan River is a relatively straight line between, the Jordan River is a straight line somewhat east of Palestine, but the West Bank is west of the Jordan River between Jordan and Israel. And that was set aside. That was considered, not part of the mandate in 1947. That was going to be where Palestinians could live. Well, Israel's decided, no, we're going to live there. And you're not. And we're going to kill you if you are there. So that's what's happening. It's absolutely the deliberate, systematic destruction of a group of people. And just one more point from Haaretz before we move on to Bernie and what he's doing that I don't like. Haaretz makes the point that many Israelis view Gaza and certainly the West Bank as a problem, right? You've got those pesky rebels every now and then killing an Israeli soldier, not just easily accepting their lands being stolen by colonizers from Israel. And, this is problematic. And some Israelis are like, well, we really shouldn't be there anyway. Let's just get the hell out. So there is this attitude among some Israelis that we're better off leaving the West Bank alone. But Haaretz is saying, don't be fooled. That attitude, please take Gaza, please take the West Bank, is not the policy of the current Israeli government. The IDF is in complete control of Gaza. Netanyahu wants the IDF to seize, and they already have seized, but he's not going to relinquish it, control of the entrances to Gaza from Egypt. He didn't do that for humanitarian aid purposes. He did that so he could crush and destroy and strangle and eradicate Gaza. And we see what's happening in the West Bank as well. So it is clearly genocide. This is genocide that the Harris-Biden administration is all in for. That's why I can't support them. That's why I won't vote for it. I won't vote for Harris. I won't vote for another Harris administration, another term, because she's made it clear beyond any doubt, no peradventure whatsoever, she ain't going to stop the shipment of weapons of killing to Israel. I won't vote for that. So where do we want to go right now? Yeah, let's go to Bernie first. Do I have the Bernie? Yeah. So there are a lot. I got this from, by the way, saw this yesterday on Brianna Joy Gray's program. She was on with Sabby Sabs. That was a good call, good conversation. Sabby is more. I like her. I think she's good. I like Brianna Joy. I find Brianna Joy Gray better as on the whole as a host. But Sabby, I think, is unrealistic in her description of Harris's campaign is imploding, as how, because she often talks about, and I'm sure this is true, she's from Boston, she goes into African-American neighborhoods and poorer neighborhoods, a lot of poor white people in Boston as well, just as they're all over the country. But it's interesting, that's a city where the dividing line, the class divide isn't necessarily based on race, because there are many longtime white Boston families that are, really suffering, struggling. So Sabby took the view, says that she spoke to a lot of Bostonians of color and white who don't like Harris and aren't going to vote for Harris. They feel like things were better under Trump. And maybe there is some truth to that. But from all the polls I've seen, she says, a lot of voters of color say they aren't going to support Harris because they don't like the way Israel has dominated the decision-making process. The Israeli government makes the decisions, at least when it comes to foreign policy. And they're right to be upset about that. That's a good reason not to vote for Harris. It's not a reason to vote for Trump. And Sabby makes that point. But I think she exaggerates the amount of traditionally Democratic voters who are going to cross over and vote for Trump. I just don't. I mean, she's on the ground. I'm not. The polls don't support her view, in my opinion. From what I've seen, they don't. All right, here's Bernie, and he's going to answer a question in a very evasive way. Let's put it that way.
That's what we've got to do. I have so many friends that were Bernie or bust. And when you didn't win in 2016 or 2020, they bust. They checked out of politics, and then they hard pivoted into Bitcoins.
Wow, really?
Then they pivoted into ketamine and Zen. Let's see where that goes. But they are despondent. Jokes aside, they're despondent, Senator Sanders. Where does that leave your supporters that saw so much hope in the values you were espousing? And what do you say to my friends who now feel like you may be falling in line a little bit too much with the corporate Democratic establishment?
All right, so many people who, they see Bernie give speeches for Kamala. They saw Bernie in 2016 busting a hump for Hillary after he was clearly, lost a rigged process that was, designed to defeat him. In 2020, Obama put his foot on the scale to make sure Bernie didn't win. Now, I always felt like that was a little overstated. I felt like there was clearly a majority of Democratic primary voters. I wish this weren't the case, but my sense in 2020 was a majority of Democratic voters did not want Bernie to be the nominee. And in fact, if given a choice between Bernie and Biden, they seemed to prefer Biden. I wish that weren't the case. I think they were wrong, but okay. I don't think that was the case in 2016. I think Bernie should have been the nominee for a lot of reasons. I think he would have beaten Trump, but he wasn't. He lost a process that was rigged against him clearly in 2016, arguably in 2020. And he didn't fight back. He bowed his head. He followed the marching orders that the Democratic National Committee gave him. And now, I think this gentleman's name is Minaj, is saying to him, I have people who gave you money and they're just so upset. They feel like there was flush it down the toilet. They were hoping that you would be a fighter, and you haven't been. What can I tell them? How can we continue? Can you give us a roadmap to fight against the corporate elites who dominate both parties, including the one that you may not be technically a member because you're an independent, but that you caucus with and that you support and that you spoke at whose convention you spoke? And whose candidates you endorse? Could you respond to the despondency? That's the question.
Look, at this particular moment in history, and perhaps in any moment in history, despair is not an option. To say,
well, I don't know why shouldn't people despair? Where's the hope? If you're saying we shouldn't despair, you're a leader. Where do you think people should go to hopefully be able to make things a little better, Bernie? That's the question.
I supported Bernie. He didn't win. I'm going into Bitcoin. Sorry, not good enough.
That's such a wrong answer, Bernie. People aren't saying, I'm going to Bitcoin because you didn't win. They're saying you're not fighting for us. And no, you're fighting for the man. That's what we're upset about. I get that attitude 100%. Right? Why come on and do my live stream if there's zero hope of making any difference whatsoever? And I asked Lawrence, I was like, hey, where do we go? Where do we go? Because, his view, and I understand it. Hey, Harris won't be as bad. Maybe she won't. But where do we go? I can't go to Harris at this point. We've seen too much go so badly wrong when we accept a Democratic establishment candidate. Even when it's a candidate like a Barack Obama, who certainly presents as a real break from the past, who campaigns on change, which is what voters are desperate, for which we are desperate. But he didn't change the basic dynamic, which is that the rich and powerful decide policy. Period. What's your response to that, Brian? By the way, AOC, same thing. People put a lot of hope into AOC. She was clearly not deserving of that.
All right. That's going to be your most controversial statement of this whole interview.
All right. There is a reality out there. And the reality is that Donald Trump is not only an authoritarian person, he is a xenophobe. He tries to divide us up by the color of our skin or where we were born. You're familiar with the Muslim ban, to say the least, and so forth and so on. So I think, not to mention a dozen other issues. So I think if you are a human being who wants to live in a sane and decent society, who is concerned about your kids, you know what? Sorry, you don't have a right to check out.
So my response is, I agree. We don't have a right to check out. And your points about Trump are fair, although perhaps somewhat exaggerated. Because, for example, the argument about dividing by the skin, I guess that's fair. I don't want to get into trying to defend Donald Trump whatsoever. But, Sabi says, hey, he's got a lot of color support from people of color. That's what Sabi says. I don't know. Maybe that's true. I'm not aware of that, but maybe. But Bernie's point is, well, hey, if you want a better world, support Kamala Harris. But that doesn't work, Bernie, because homeless populations have grown under Biden and Harris. Because the endless wars are continuing under Biden and Harris. Because genocide now, which we weren't seeing it, certainly not in this virulent form that's happening now. Yes, Gaza was being dismantled by Israel, Palestine being dismantled by Israel, but the killing, the level of killing has been, notched to, up by what do you call it? You put the little 2, squared, it's been by exponentially. It's exponentially greater under, during the Biden-Harris administration. So your argument that somehow we have to vote for Harris if we want things to get better for our families doesn't work, because they've made things worse. And you haven't fought them. That's the concern. And he completely, utterly ignores that point. It's very and that sucks, right? That just sucks. Brianna Joy Gray says she worked for Bernie. She worked for Bernie back in 2016. I think she was his communications director. She had a high job in that campaign. Good for her. She says he won't come on her program. He doesn't talk to her, doesn't answer her calls. He's complete, because she's takes on the establishment, which she's part of. He may be a little bit of a gadfly. He may, go on CNN and say, well, I don't agree, but he still supports it. And you can see from these policies, these are people will say, well, you're cherry picking. No, these are really important. This is really important stuff. border wall, fracking, climate catastrophe right now. The ecocide, both parties are responsible for that. I don't know what's more important than genocide, endless war, calling for us to confront Iran at every opportunity. And then when it's a really, really good policy, Medicare for all, no, I don't support it. So I don't see the difference. I don't see this vast gulf. I had a friend say, well, what about abortion? That's a really important. I've had several women actually, it's interesting women bring that up. Abortion's a really important issue to me. I think we absolutely need to have choice. Reproductive right is a human right. The right to decide whether you're going to have a baby or not is a human right that we must recognize if we're going to be a fully civilized society, decent society. You've got to recognize that. But it's not like the Democrats have been great on that issue, A. And B, Trump is now saying let the states decide. Well, I'm not sure that's such a bad solution. Maybe it should be political. Maybe we've seen in Kansas, for example, there was a rejection by the voters of an abortion ban. In Maryland, where I live, their Democrats are totally supportive of choice. But that said, they will not back, as far as I know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe there was a bill to amend the Maryland Constitution. I could be wrong about that. But if there is such a bill, that's how you protect choice. You protect reproductive rights. So Trump's announced solution, which is let the voters decide, isn't totally misguided, totally wrong-headed. That said, yes, it would probably leave some folks, like those in Alabama, Mississippi, they might not have right to choose. And it would be terrible. But it would also be a rallying point for Democrats. It could actually lead to a Democratic resurgence. As we saw in Kansas, most voters, even in that blood red state, are not prepared to outlaw abortion. If this happens in Mississippi, Alabama, what have you, that's an issue Democrats can campaign on. I'm not saying I like it. I think, on balance, better to have it be recognized as a fundamental right under the Constitution, but it's not explicit in the Constitution either. It's an important issue. I can't make it a litmus test. My litmus test is, are you going to make things better? And I don't believe, and I think I have very, very good reason to believe that Kamala will not make things better. So I got this, this goes along with the Bernie. So I used to work for Our Revolution, which is a progressive or self-described progressive group. And there were a lot of things I really liked about Our Revolution, when I first started. And one of the, I guess I felt, I got involved in the Maryland chapter first, actually in the Montgomery County chapter. Then I became Maryland state organizer. And then I ultimately moved on to be a national organizer, right? So I was a staffer, I was a paid staffer. So, those jobs aren't so easy to get necessarily. And I was very pleased I got one. And I don't want to badmouth the organization. I'm really not going to badmouth it. What I'm going to say is this disappointed me. Back in 2020, Our Revolution did not campaign for Joe Biden. They wouldn't do it. Now we did make effort to keep the Senate blue. If you recall, or maybe to turn the Senate blue, the Georgia races were undecided after November when in 2020, when Biden had won the Electoral College, he had won it, and then Trump tried to prevent him from becoming president, nevertheless. But the Georgia state races were very, very close with Warnock and I forget the neo-lib over there, John Ossoff, right? And so we worked to get those guys in, but we didn't make calls for Joe Biden. We just wouldn't do it. We didn't believe in Joe Biden. We thought that he was a problematic candidate in many ways. I'm very disappointed now to see Our Revolution going out, busting a hump for Kamala Harris, who whose policies are terrible. Her policies don't embody what I thought our revolution stood for. One of the areas where I had a problem with our revolution was they seemed unwilling to ever embrace third-party candidates. I remember one time we did endorse in Baltimore a Green Party candidate, and she narrowly lost. We thought she had a real chance to win. She was really a good, attractive candidate in many ways. She was able to raise money, which I, by the way, hate that. I think if you can raise money, that raises all sorts of questions about whether you're really a good candidate. For me, for working people, right? Because moneyed interests give you money. The ones who have money, people who have money, give you money because they think you'll give them more money back in return than they're paying you. Of course, Bernie was able to raise a lot of money from poor people, and unfortunately, they lost that money. It's gone, and they'll never get it back, and they're not getting it back from policies that Bernie's espousing. So there's a lot of questions, about whether a candidate who we consider as a good candidate because they can raise money really is good or if they're bad because they can raise money. But she did. I'm looking her up right now because I can see even her face from our the endorsement we gave her. I guess was it in 22? Maybe it was in 28. I can't remember now. Was it 2018? I really liked her, but now I can't. I'm sorry, folks. She was running for Baltimore City Council, and we thought she had a real chance. She was running up against an establishment Dem who hadn't done anything good for the people of his district. And he won by a very strong, very quick. Did I disappear there for a second? I hope not. He won by a significant margin. So even there, we couldn't get a Green candidate over the hump. It was disappointing. But there was a big push. It was really tough to get our revolution team to agree to that candidate, to agree to endorse a Green. Democratic Party has a lot of influence over every progressive group out there, whether it's certainly the Sierra Club, which is more centrist. It doesn't matter. The Democratic Party, maybe you could say DSA is a little more independent, and I've seen them go after so-called progressives like Jamie Raskin. But even there, remember, AOC was a DSA member, and she still has a lot of influence, even though they haven't endorsed her. People criticize. A lot of people left the DSA, Democratic Socialist America. A lot of people left DSA because they refused to endorse AOC. Donors tend to be more conservative, the most conservative members of every group they're in. And even in DSA, the donors are more conservative than the rank and file. That's certainly the case with our revolution. So our revolution raising money by saying, hey, we're going to help elect Kamala. It's very, very disappointing. It's not what I believe in. And I wrote the guys back. I said, hey, what's this about? Remember, I worked there. I'd hope I'd have a little bit of, they'd at least return my emails. But no, they won't return. I've tried to get the director on this program. He doesn't even respond to my texts. It's very, very unfortunate. And they've gone on conservative media even. Now you could say, well, you're not a big fish. Okay. Well, you'd think they'd want to help build my audience, my group, right? They want to help be part of this. And no. Just like Jimmy, he can't get any progressives on his show But it's not just Jimmy. AOC, she won't go on Brianna Joy Gray's program. Bernie won't go on Brianna Joy Gray's. And she worked for Bernie. Democratic establishment, Democratic elite figures, they want nothing to do with progressives. It's so sad. But it tells you we've got to move on. We've got to move somewhere else. We've got to move to a different place. And I say that place is Jill Stein. All right. I got a great call from Lawrence. Really appreciate a lot more to talk about. I want to talk about Kamala Harris's housing plan and contrast it a little bit with Trump's, and why ultimately, while there's some things to like in what she enunciates, it's not enough for me. For many reasons. I mean, the biggest reason is I don't trust her at this point. I just don't. I don't trust her to promote progressive solutions. I think it's clear that that's not where her heart is. And while she may say things to get elected, she doesn't believe them to the point where she's going to fight for solutions that will make life better for poor Australian working people if in any way an organized group of wealthy Americans opposes them. All right, here's, now let me be real clear. There's some areas where there's wealthy people on both sides, right? There's some issues like abortion, like choice. Politically, it's not disadvantageous. Financially, it's not disadvantageous for Harris to support choice. So she might well support it, right? Because it doesn't hurt her. But if she's to support condition aid to Israel on an end to their genocidal campaign, that would hurt her. She's not going to do it. Guaranteeing every American housing would be a significant problem for her donors in the banking industry and the construction industry. Maybe not so much in the construction because you might have more houses built, but you'd have fewer high-end, super profitable houses built. So she's not going to support that. You'd think depopulating prisons, reducing overcrowding in prisons would be something that a progressive would support. She didn't, because it wasn't in her political interest to do that. So I don't buy what she's selling if I can see that what she's selling isn't going to be popular among the billionaire class. It's going to be, there's going to be virtually no billionaires who support what she's doing, unlike choice, which is an area where the billionaire class is divided. You'd think, I would have thought, before I play the Stein ad real quick, I would have thought the billionaire class might not be as united as it is in support of Israel, but there are a lot of Jewish billionaires, and I can't quite understand it, but they just don't seem to give a crap about Palestinian people.
People are tired of being thrown under the bus by wealthy elites and their bought politicians. Tired of living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to pay the rent, locked in student debt and medical debt, child poverty doubling, rising diseases of despair, growing hopelessness. The political system is broken. The two Wall Street parties are bought and paid for. Over 60% of us now say the bipartisan establishments failed us, and we need a party that serves the people. I'm Jill Stein, and I'm running for president to offer that choice for the people outside of the failed two-party system. We'll put solutions to the crises we face, crushing inequality, endless war, and climate collapse. And we'll put these front and center in this election and on the ballot across the country. The ruling parties that got us into this mess aren't getting us out. Both parties are squandering trillions on the endless war machine, fueling conflict around the world, while tens of millions here at home lack food, housing, healthcare. Democrats have betrayed their promises for working people, youth, and the climate again and again, while Republicans don't even make such promises in the first place. And both parties are a danger to our democracy, expanding censorship, criminalizing protest, throwing competitors off the ballot, suppressing debates,
American people who've been systematically locked out of these debates,
rigging their primaries. So forget the pundits and the attack dogs who tell you to ignore your misery and just keep voting for those who caused it in the first place. Change won't come from the ruling elites. It comes from we, the people. And when we stand together, we can create living wage jobs for all Americans. We can guarantee an economic bill of rights with the right to a job, to health care, to housing, to food, education, and more. We can abolish student debt, medical debt. We can create a Green New Deal with millions of jobs to fight climate collapse and protect Mother Earth. And we can ensure our constitutional rights and freedoms and justice for all. We can end the endless wars and rampant militarism and use diplomacy and international law instead to end violence, occupation, and apartheid. We do have the power, and we can use it in this election to start building an America and a world that works for all of us. Go to JillStein2024.com and join us.
All right, so really, really powerful ad. I mean, I don't know what there is to even argue about at this point. And yeah, I mean, I'll leave it at that. I'm not clear what there is to argue. I'll be back on Monday. It'll be an Arlen Monday, at least I'm hoping so. We'll continue the conversation then. Have a great weekend.